The wall behind Jabber collapses in an instant, leaving Ludo very bewildered. After a few seconds of silence, Jabber's unconscious body suddenly reacts and lets out a wild scream. Without giving him time to react, he spins forward at full speed, destroying everything in his path with his claws. Ludo sees this and realizes that Jabber still has a lot of strength left, but at that moment he notices Follow, who is still trying to save Gris. Ludo knows that if he doesn't move away from them, he'll end up involving them in the fight, so he quickly runs in the opposite direction. Jabber catches up to him in an instant to attack, so Ludo tries to use the protective amulet. However, since there is no hostility in Jabber's unconscious body, the amulet doesn't stop him like before. That's why Ludo immediately pushes Jabber away, managing to shove him far enough to put some distance between them. Jabber simply gets up and starts screaming again, and from the look on his face, Ludo confirms that he really was knocked unconscious by his own poison. Gris's amulet only works against hostility, so he can't believe that Jabber figured out how to counter it so quickly. Ludo admits that Jabber must have a lot of experience and determination, although at that moment it also occurs to him that Jabber might just be a super masochist. For a brief moment, we return to Ludo's past, which honestly I'm already getting used to, back when he was just a child. After getting beaten up, the kids who hit him called him a super masochist for not fighting back at all. That day, Ludo went home and asked Leguto what that word meant, but the question only left his father very confused. Ludo still remembers that word to this day, but realizes he has no idea how to defeat a super masochist. Maybe by giving them love? Before Jabber can reach him, Ludo quickly dodges all his attacks. With a single move, Jabber slices through several pillars at once with his claws and uses the debris to launch himself into the air. Ludo dodges him just in time and tries to use Gris's amulet as a shield, but Jabber's claws easily cut through it to reach him. Just as he's about to cut him, Sanka's staff comes flying in and pins Jabber to the floor. Ludo is a bit confused, but seconds later Sanka appears in terrible shape and tells Jabber that he hasn't defeated him yet, so he can't start playing around with a nobody. His body is still affected by the poison, but Sanka is furious, so he tells Ludo that it's his turn now, since he needs to give him a good punishment. Ludo comments that it seems he's still alive, but just barely, although Sanka assures him that he's in perfect condition and warns him not to underestimate ordinary guys. Putting that aside, he mentions the fact that he's finally able to use his vital instrument, referring to the creepy amulet that accompanies him. Ludo clarifies that his ability has no effect on Jabber's unconscious body, so he can barely dodge him. Sanka mentions that his amulet reacts to hostility. When Ludo asks how he knows that, he replies that he was watching and analyzing his fight. After all, he's his instructor, and had to observe his skills and fighting style. Sanka mentions that he still can't move well because of Jabber's poison, and Gris's amulet apparently is no longer effective. Taking this into account, he thinks of another strategy and asks Ludo to let him get hit. This clearly leaves him confused, but Sanka assures him it will just be a small test. He can't move well, but if he attacks, it's possible his weapon will react and send him flying. His lovely assist staff has a longer reach than his fists, so he can hit Jabber before Jabber's claws reach him. Ludo replies that if it doesn't work, they'll just get hit hard, so he's not convinced by that so-called strategy. Sanka tells him not to worry about the details, and at that moment Jabber breaks free from the staff, taking on a wild stance. Suddenly he charges straight at them and attacks with his claws, but both manage to dodge, so he only ends up slicing a pillar to pieces. Sanka warns Ludo that under no circumstances should he let those claws touch him, since even a small scratch is enough to immobilize him for a while. Seeing how much he dislikes those claws, Ludo simply tells him not to focus on that, throwing his own words back at him. This makes Sanka furious, so he decides Ludo has earned himself a good punch. Without hesitation, Sanka lunges to hit Ludo, so Gris's amulet reacts to his hostility and sends him flying straight toward Jabber. Sanka is very surprised that it actually worked, so he immediately lands a solid punch on Jabber, slamming him against a wall. Deep down, he really didn't think it would react, and Ludo gets furious when he sees that Sanka actually tried to hit him with a lot of hostility, although Sanka excuses himself by saying it was just the test he mentioned. Putting that aside, he says he'll come up with an effective strategy against Jabber, so it's time to give him a good beating. Once again, Sanka approaches Ludo from behind to hit him, so the amulet sends him flying just like before. Taking advantage of the momentum, Sanka lands a solid blow on Jabber, slamming him into the ground. While in the air, Sanka is surprised that Ludo can extend the distance of his jump using the amulet, although he mentions that he doesn't pay much attention to it. Ludo replies that it's because he's doing it carelessly, and runs straight at him to do the same. Sanka gets angry and charges at him even more aggressively, demanding that he be more considerate of him. Without hesitation, Ludo uses the amulet to launch him directly at Jabber, so Sanka sends him flying again with his staff. Being controlled by Ludo, Sanka manages to land several merciless blows on Jabber and ends up smashing him against several pillars. After that brutal beating, Jabber finally regains consciousness and wakes up to see Sanka about to hit him again. Unable to dodge, Jabber takes the blow directly to his head and ends up embedded in the ground from the force of the impact. Ludo stops controlling Sanka's position, so Sanka loses his balance and falls on his back, though he's relieved that it's finally over since he can't move anymore. Now that everything is over, Ludo deactivates the use of his vital instrument, but is surprised to see that what was once Gris's amulet turns to ashes before his eyes. This leaves him devastated, unable to understand what happened, since he didn't do anything wrong. Seeing this, Sanka realizes that the things Ludo transforms into weapons have a time limit, though he wonders if there might be another reason. Ludo continues to mourn the loss of Gris's precious amulet and is quickly consumed by guilt. Sanka mentions that he looks a bit strange, but at that moment Ludo simply collapses, unable to move, and reveals a small cut on his side. Sanka is surprised to see this, since he doesn't know when Jabber scratched him with his claws. And right at that moment, he hears something behind him, and when he turns around he sees Jabber stabbing himself with his own claws. The small dose of poison allows him to get up suddenly, and with a smile he comments that he played too much, but apparently it's a good job for being unconscious. Sanka asks him how he's okay after taking such a beating. At that point, Jabber tells him that it's thanks to his left claw, which can act as an anesthetic if used correctly, although that's not all. Jabber admits that he didn't think things would go so badly for him, but it was thanks to him and his friend Ludo, so he's grateful. He's used to the right side poison he was given, and it only affects him for 10 minutes, so for him it will probably stop working in 30 minutes. Without giving him a chance to react, Jabber injects Sanka with the same poison again, leaving him completely paralyzed. Jabber explains that they'll get mad at him again if he doesn't achieve his goal, so he can't let him go. He's sorry, but that's just how it is. Without wasting any more time, he approaches Ludo and apologizes for making him wait. No matter how hard he tries, Sanka can't move, so all he can do is watch as Jabber carries Ludo away on his shoulder. As he runs to find the exit, Jabber realizes he forgot about the other two, but decides not to worry about them, knowing that she'll probably take them home. Ludo hears his words but can't move at all, so all he can do is think that everything that happened is his fault, which fills him with even more frustration. Jabber keeps running and jumps up when he sees the hole they fell through, though he's surprised to find himself outside since he was sure that hole was inside the building. That's when he realizes Riho is there, and she simply points at him, saying that she's already found him. Unable to react, Jabber takes a hard hit from Engine, who uses her umbrella to send him flying, making him let go of Ludo. Joined by other cleaners, Engine intimidatingly asks him how he managed to create such a mess, and tells him he needs a good cleaning. Now, Jabber is left motionless after such a blow, so Engine mentions that the building's basement is very deep, and the chokers they use to communicate don't work underground. They couldn't easily call for help in the trap he set for them, which is why she considers him a classic villain. Engine comments that they wouldn't have come if Tom, one of the followers, hadn't found a phone in the village. She tells him that Grizz and Folo are still down below, so she's worried about their condition, but Engine reassures her and reminds her that they're not that weak. Jabber finally speaks, excitedly mentioning that it's a group with a bunch of strong people. He comments that he's a mess, but they're looking at him like he's trash, which only excites him even more, so he feels like he's getting aroused. This leaves Engine and the others petrified, not knowing what to say in the face of something so strange. When Engine reacts, he asks Ludo if he really spent the whole time fighting this weird guy, since he's clearly insane. Ludo still can't move, but Riho comments that he looks better than she thought, which is a relief. Another of the cleaners asks her how she thought he would be, since the poor guy can barely breathe, so he's definitely not okay. On the other hand, the biggest of the cleaners can't contain his anger and asks Jabber how he could hurt his teammates, vowing that he'll pay for it. His companion simply tells him to be quiet because he's being too loud, but Engine ignores them and tells Jabber that he wants to ask him a bunch of questions. However, he hopes Jabber doesn't think he can just go back to his hole after messing with the cleaners. Jabber realizes he's in trouble, though his smile never leaves his face and he simply says he has to run or he'll lose his freedom forever. So this is when he has to come up with an escape plan. Despite this, as he stands up, he tells them that he also has his orders and his mission is to take Ludo with him. That's why, even though he really wants to escape, he knows he can't do it. Jabber makes it clear to them that even if he can't beat them or is about to die, he can't go home until he completes his mission. Engine and the rest of the cleaners take a fighting stance when they see him holding his vital instruments. Jabber suddenly shouts and exclaims that he doesn't want to do it, but even so he draws his claws and gets ready to fight them. However, right at that moment, he gets confused when someone hugs him from behind, preventing him from moving. When he looks back, Jabber recognizes the person as Choni, a small girl who asks him to leave. He asks her not to get in his way, saying that he can't leave yet since he's supposed to take Ludo with him. She replies that time is up and reminds him that Ludo's companions are in the way, so they have to go. Engine watches this interaction closely and wonders where that woman came from. Jabber gets angry with her since he doesn't want to leave things unfinished and, in his opinion, the fun is just getting started. Before he can continue speaking, Choni tells him that the boss was smiling, and for some reason, that makes Jabber stop moving completely. After a few seconds of silence, he slowly turns to look at her with a dark and intimidating expression, but Choni doesn't look away and simply holds his gaze even more firmly, so Jabber finally accepts that it's already too late, and there's nothing he can do. In response, Choni decides to let him go, and Jabber apologizes to the cleaners, explaining that they have to leave, which he finds a shame, but there's no other choice. The group simply watches them, noticing that behind them there is some kind of portal in the wall shaped like a manhole. Jabber tells them that he never imagined he could have so much fun with a Sferino like Ludo, so he hopes they'll say hi to him for him, since he's probably unconscious from the poison. However, before he can leave, Ludo shows that he's awake and furious and tells him to wait because they're not done yet. Jabber is surprised, clearly impressed that he can stay conscious even with his poison. Ludo makes it clear to him that until he can pay him back for what he did to Grizz, this can't be over. Jabber just laughs, exclaiming that he likes his fighting spirit, but before he can say anything else, he falls completely silent when he sees the mark on Ludo's gloves. Jabber comments that apparently he also has one from that series, though the others have no idea what he's talking about. He mentions that it's quite a coincidence and that the boss will be pleased when he tells him, so next time he'll be better prepared to go after him. Before anyone can stop them, Choni and Jabber leave through the portal, disappearing in seconds. This leaves them all very shocked, but Ludo keeps thinking about what he said, carefully looking at the mark on his gloves as he wonders what he meant by the series. After those events, the cleaners wait outside and Sanka goes out to join them while Riho talks to him. Meanwhile, everyone gathers around Grizz, so Ludo quickly goes to see him but stops when he sees how badly hurt he is. Clearly affected, Ludo kneels beside him to talk and apologizes for having broken his amulet. Grizz makes an effort to speak and tells him that the amulet was something he cherished greatly. This makes Ludo feel even more devastated, as he keeps clinging to the ashes of the amulet. However, Grizz smiles and tells him that if it was able to help him, then that makes her very happy. Ludo is surprised, and at that moment the ashes of the amulet are carried away by the wind, while Grizz tells him he did a good job. After returning to the base, Ludo decides to spend some time alone to process what happened. Engine approaches him to ask why he looks so down, mentioning that he did a good job learning to use his vital instrument. Ludo interrupts him and reminds him of the fact that Grizz was stabbed, so he couldn't possibly have any other expression right now. After all, while he was in the sphere, he couldn't save the person who was helping him, and down here he couldn't either. He thought he had changed or made progress, but the same thing keeps happening, so he wonders if he'll ever really be able to change in his life. While Ludo laments, Engine remains calm and clarifies that Grizz was willing to risk his life for his companions. He didn't defend him because he was a Spherian, but because he's a companion who can take care of objects and people. Without further delay, Engine has him follow so he can visit Grizz, and Ludo is left speechless when he sees him in perfect condition. Grizz greets him cheerfully, congratulating him for mastering his power and saying he's glad he's okay. Ludo can't believe what he's seeing, so he asks if he's really alive, which leaves Grizz a bit confused. Engine and Tommy comfort Ludo, finally understanding that he was feeling down because he thought Grizz had died. Clearly embarrassed, Ludo pushes them away and exclaims that it was all very confusing, since it's normal to think he had died after being stabbed like that. Grizz explains that he owes it all to the medical team of the cleaners, especially to the girl from that group whose name is Aisha Stilsa, the only healer giver among the cleaners. Aisha gets nervous and tells him that this time it was just luck, so it's nothing special. Ludo is a bit confused by her attitude, but Engine explains to him that she's a very shy girl. That's why Grizz turns to her and says that she saved him when he was about to die, and it's something he's truly grateful for. He also turns to Follow, asking him not to feel so bad because thanks to his protection, he didn't receive any more attacks from Jabber. Grizz reminds him that he can't become a giver in a rush, so he should go at his own pace. Follow is moved to tears by his words, so he doesn't hesitate to jump in and give him a hug. Finally, Gris turns to Ludo, telling him that he also did a great job since he coordinated with Sanga to corner that really strong guy, which was impressive. That's why he should forget about the amulet, because if something he values can help someone else, he can consider himself fulfilled, and that's his way of valuing things. Upon understanding that, Ludo finally accepts it and tells him that he's truly glad he's alive. Putting that aside, Engine mentions that the raiders went all out and picked a fight with the cleaners, so now they'll be fighting them, not just with trash beasts. In addition, they also have new information. Right at that moment, someone else enters the room to tell them that the raiders mentioned a border, and it seems they're also investigating something about the sphere. Engine is surprised to see who entered the room and casually tells Ludo that that's the boss. Ludo is left stunned to see that the boss of the cleaners is right in front of him, and she comes over to greet him, apologizing for not being there on his first day. The leader of the cleaners introduces herself as Corvus Arca, so Ludo greets her nervously. Corvus mentions that she thought he was only with them waiting to receive information, and they don't need someone like that. However, she was able to see the good in his teammates and that he risked his life to defend them, in addition to having gained a great power that can contribute a lot to the cause. So she has no objection to him staying. And so, Corvus declares right then and there that she officially accepts him into the cleaners and invites him to her office to give him his uniform and some information. Ludo follows her without hesitation, and while he puts on his new uniform, Corvus tells him that the border is something that exists between the sphere and Terra, and it's said that those who try to cross it to reach the sphere die. And there's a story that she found very interesting. There was a woman in the Forbidden Zone closest to the border, and it said that this woman helped a traveler who got lost in the Forbidden Zone. The traveler then asked her what she was doing in that place, to which the woman replied that she watched people fall from above. The woman stayed to live there for many years, and one day she said that there are people who can go up and down without dying. Corvus comments that it's likely the woman saw someone who can cross the border. Ludo then realizes that if he finds the person the woman saw, he'll discover a way to get back up. Corvus tells him that this is the reason he made it alive to Terra, and warns him that it will surely be dangerous to get there. He asks him what he wants to do, and Ludo answers without hesitation that he wants to go. Just at that moment, Engine enters the office and gets excited to see that he's wearing the cleaner's uniform, saying it looks really good on him. In another scene, Sanga is in a dark hallway, completely terrified as he sees something huge coming out of one of the doors. 6 hours before that, we see that Ludo tries to leave the base, but Follow tries to stop him, saying that today is not the day to go see the woman from the Forbidden Zone. Follow is dragged all the way due to Ludo's strength, who keeps moving forward without stopping, saying that it's possible that woman has a clue about how to return to the sphere, so he can't stop. Engine appears out of nowhere and asks him to calm down, reminding him that they need to prepare before going to a dangerous place, especially if it's the Forbidden Zone. He asks him if he really wants to go to that place without any prior information and without having fully tested his powers. This makes Ludo stop to think, since he didn't know he had to test his power. Engine mentions that it's great he can already use it well, but they need to know its limits, weaknesses, and other details. Ludo asks him if he's going to go with him, and Engine replies that it's obvious, since going alone to the Forbidden Zone is crazy. Despite this, Ludo looks at him with some suspicion, since he clearly remembers that Engine was alone when he found him in that zone. Engine explains to him that a cleaner, while eliminating trash beasts, also gathers information about them, so it's beneficial for them to go to the Forbidden Zone as well. Additionally, at the same time, they have to watch out for raiders. Ludo wonders how people like them can become givers, and Engine replies that not everyone is good, and not everyone can take good care of things. Those who seem good can treat their belongings badly, and those who seem bad might own something they truly value. It doesn't matter if a person is good or bad to become a giver, but those who dislike givers call them dependents. Engine admits that to normal people, being obsessed with a single thing might seem creepy, which he finds somewhat amusing. Ludo is left thinking about it, since for some reason he assumed that bad people didn't take care of their things, and now he feels as if he has done something wrong. Engine interrupts his thoughts by telling him to take it easy today, since he hasn't stopped running around all day. Taking this into account, Ludo decides to go to his room to rest, but after a while he realizes that he doesn't know how to relax. After all, he's not the type who sleeps much, and in reality, he just feels like digging through the trash. After a few seconds, the silence in the room is suddenly broken when Rio slams her door open to come in, greeting him cheerfully. She exclaims that she's going to show him the cleaner's headquarters, and although he's very confused at first, Ludo decides to follow her. They both walk through the halls of the headquarters, and the first thing Rio shows him is the gym. Then she shows him the dining hall and the bathrooms, and as they walk, she mentions that the headquarters is a bit old, but actually has everything you need. Ludo admits that it has a lot more than when he lived in the sphere, so Rio asks him what his life was like up there. He replies that he used to go sightseeing with Leguto, pick up trash, and people made fun of him for it. Ryo is surprised that there are people up there who do that too, but reassures him a bit by clarifying that there are people like that down here as well. Yay! She asks him what he used to eat, to which Ludo replies that he ate bread, soup, and things like that. Rio then asks him about sweets, but Ludo apparently doesn't know what she's talking about, since only the rich can eat sweets. Upon hearing this, Rio reveals that they have sweets, which surprises Ludo and makes him incredibly excited. She shows him different kinds of sweets and tells him that in Terra, there are people who make a living selling food, so they regularly buy sweets. Ludo is mesmerized when he sees the sweets, since he has never eaten them before. Seeing this, Engine comments that in Terra, sweets are even more popular than other illicit substances, but it's not nice to become addicted. In Terra, it's hard to grow vegetables because of the pollution, but among the food vendors, there are givers specialized in cooking, and maybe thanks to them, there's a greater supply of sweets. Ludo remains frozen in front of the huge amount of sweets, but Rio encourages him to try them, so he picks one up and brings it to his mouth with trembling hands. When Ludo tastes a sweet for the first time, his whole world lights up, but a second later, he lets out a wild scream and starts eating sweets non-stop. Engine comments that he's going to get addicted, and Ludo doesn't stop and keeps swallowing. Just then, another one of the cleaners approaches him and looks down at him with an intimidating expression. Ludo pauses for a moment to look back at him, afraid that he might also be after the sweets. That puts him in a dilemma, since he wants to keep eating sweets. But even so, with great effort, he decides to offer him one. The cleaner snatches the sweet from him without a second thought, but after putting it in his mouth, he holds out his hand to ask for more. Ludo quickly complains, but another one of the cleaners arrives to move him aside and apologizes to Ludo. Later that day, Engine asks Rio what they're going to do with Ludo, but she clarifies that she didn't think that would happen, although she's glad he found his favorite food. Once again, we see Sanka, who is frozen in the hallway when he sees something huge coming out of a door. However, he becomes even more terrified when he realizes that it's not something, but someone. So he panics and warns the others that there's a strange outsider in the place. But soon after, he discovers that it's actually Ludo. After that, they decide to take Ludo to his training, but Sanka gets confused when he sees that once again he can't use his vital instrument, so he assumes that Ludo went so crazy over the sweets that he forgot how to use it. Enji can't stop laughing at him, and Rio comments that the test of his powers has turned into a test of his diet, which makes him laugh even more. Meanwhile, Ludo wonders what's wrong with him, since he was supposed to have already learned how to use his power. Sanka gets tired of waiting for him to do something, so he mentions the fact that Ludo used to fix things that people threw away. Therefore, if that's the basis of his ability, then maybe it only reacts to trash or broken objects. With that in mind, Sanka brings him a pile of garbage and asks him to pick whatever he wants from there. Ludo thinks about it for a moment, and after a tactical analysis, finds an object he can use his power on and manages to turn it into a weapon. Everyone is amazed to witness that. And Engin tells Sanka that his theory was spot on, so he congratulates him. Sanka gets excited upon hearing his praise, but quickly changes his expression and clarifies that an ordinary person can be analyzed more objectively than a genius, so they shouldn't underestimate an ordinary mind. Ludo thanks him anyway, but Sanka brushes it off and asks him to try turning objects into instruments one after another. After a while, Ludo finds another object and manages to turn it into another instrument, proving that he can do it. After he transforms the third object, Sanka complains about how unfair it is, but at that moment Ludo suddenly collapses, bleeding from his nose. Engin mentions that he expected something like this, explaining that the time he used vital instruments one after another, he also started bleeding. This is probably because the essence of the gloves is so great that the body can't handle it for long. Ludo gets up to ask what he means, and Engin explains that the longer you take care of something, the better a vital instrument it becomes, and the more anima it has. That's what they call taking on good essence, and the better the essence, the greater the power it can unleash. However, essence isn't everything when it comes to fighting, since the user's experience and imagination determine their skill, so everything is important. Sanka understands that if Ludo has been using his gloves since he was a child, then the essence must be good. Even so, he doesn't understand why it affects his body so much, and that makes him wonder if it has to do with the fact that the gloves are standard issue. Ludo gets up as best he can, even though he's still bleeding, and asks why the things he turns into weapons always end up falling apart. After all, the ones he just made haven't fallen apart, and they're not being destroyed one after another in order. After thinking about it for a moment, Rio mentions that maybe it's because they no longer have any regrets. His ability consists of extracting the maximum value from discarded, broken, and useless things. So it would be wonderful if they fulfilled their purpose when he uses them again. Sanka admits that doesn't make sense, since Ludo's weapon fell apart when he calmed down after the fight ended. Engine comments that this could also be part of his power, and by extracting the maximum value from trash and broken objects, they fulfill their role and are used up. That's why he didn't break Grease's amulet or the other things he turned into weapons, but instead exhausted the remaining energy in them to the limit. Ludo is surprised to realize that his ability isn't about destroying things, and Rio mentions the fact that they said his gloves were part of a series, wanting to know what that means. Ludo assumes they're from a collection, which means there are more things like them. She suddenly asks him if they have a name, since it's common to name something valuable. Ludo admits that it never occurred to him, so Engine tells him he should give it a good name. In another scene, we see Jabri and Choni meeting with their boss in a hideout near the Forbidden Zones. Upon their arrival, the boss simply starts listing several things in order. Among these, he mentions the Cleaners, the City of Arts, the Desert Altar, Vital Instruments, the Vigilante series, and Ludo. Sometime later, we see Ludo in the bathroom washing his gloves late at night, and doing this causes some discomfort in his hands. When he returns to his room, he's surprised to find Rilo waiting for him, comfortably settled on his bed. She comments that it seems he likes to stay up late since it's 4 in the morning and they're supposed to leave early tomorrow. Ludo still hasn't processed the fact that she's in his room as if it were nothing, so nervously he asks her what she's doing in his room, wanting to know when and, very importantly, how she got in. Rilo tells him that her room is above his, and since she heard some noises that caught her attention, she decided to come in through the window. Upon hearing that, Ludo apologizes for the inconvenience, but he can't help thinking about the fact that she's in his bed. Rilo looks at him and asks if his hands hurt, so Ludo quickly hides them, explaining that they don't hurt as much when he's wearing gloves, but every now and then he has to wash them. She observes him more closely and comments that those wounds look really bad, but she knows they're not burns, though she has no idea what they are. Ludo replies that that's something he'd have to ask his wretched parents, since even he doesn't know. Upon hearing that, Rilo stands up and mentions that parents give all sorts of things, both good and bad. Ludo is somewhat surprised by the way he said that, but before he can respond, Rilo leaves through the window, leaving him alone. The next day, Engine and Grease approach the craftsman's room, drawn by the enormous commotion. Seeing the mess in the place, they assume it will probably take him a while to finish what he's doing, so they leave him be. Shortly after, Ludo and the others meet with the boss, who tells them that until Ludo's full face is ready, they will first set out to make the final preparations. Ludo doesn't really understand what he's talking about, so Engine explains that when cleaners go into forbidden zones, they're required to wear a full face. Engine shows him his own, and Ludo recognizes it as the mask he was wearing the time they met in the forbidden zone. Engine tells him that the cleaners have their own craftsman, who makes their clothes and the full faces. However, he doesn't do a good job if he's given a deadline, so they adjust to his pace. Corpus explains that that's why they'll make other preparations in the meantime, and in short, they'll cast a good luck spell on Ludo. Semyo comments that no one knows what could happen in the Forbidden Zones, since as soon as they step on the waste, everything could fall apart, and a trash beast could kill him, which is something common. To minimize that risk, they ask a giver to paint a spell. The boss gave him free access, and that's why he sometimes comes to paint graffiti, but lately they haven't seen him, so maybe he's busy. Ludo asks what they'll do then, so Engine smiles and replies that they'll go to Canvas Town, the city of graffiti. He also tells him that the cleaners who will accompany them to look for the woman from the Forbidden Zone are right behind him. From Akuta, Sanka, Rilo, and Engine will go. From Igor, Delmon, and Tamsi will go. And from the followers, Grizz, Follow, and Tome will go. Engine clarifies that follower teams are usually made up of 5 people, but when they go to Forbidden Zones, only a few followers without powers go, and on the other hand, several givers. While Ludo is listening to all this, Delmon approaches him and suddenly shouts that he heard his life story, so he knows that Ludo has suffered a lot. Delmon exclaims that those who treat their companions badly will have to deal with him, and he loves passionate people, so he wants Ludo to join Igor. Tamsi steps in to ask his companion to leave him alone, explaining that Engin was the one who invited Ludo, which means he is already part of Akuta. In a friendly manner, Tamsi approaches Ludo to apologize for his companion's behavior and assures him that he is a good person, adding that he also likes passionate people. Engin decides to take advantage of the opportunity, so he asks Delmon to let them hear one of his passionate screams. Ludo waits curiously while Sanka wastes no time and puts in earplugs, quickly stepping aside. Delmon gets ready, grinding his teeth, and then screams at the top of his lungs, actually scaring Ludo. He exclaims that they are going to Canvas Town, so a steep and difficult road awaits them, but they can't give up because they are cleaners. Delmon shouts passionately, and everyone in the room does the same, but Ludo is just paralyzed by the commotion, although he ends up shouting too. Shortly after, everyone gets into the vehicle and sets off for Canvas Town, where people are painting graffiti on the city walls. As they drive through the narrow streets, the car causes some artists to lose their balance, so Engin apologizes to them and continues on his way. Ludo is surprised to see the structure they're heading toward, and after a few minutes, they finally arrive at the graffiti city. He asks if all the cities in Terra have that shape, and Tamsi tells him that most large cities have a dome to protect themselves from the debris falling from the sphere. Most people who can't live in cities and are exposed to the elements end up being crushed by the rain of garbage. Although he shouldn't worry about it, since it's the fault of those who allowed this situation to happen. Ludo is surprised to hear that, but decides not to say anything about it and continues on his way. Meanwhile, two individuals stand in front of the gates of Canvas Town, and one of them says there's something strange about this city. After all, the gate is wide open, but they can't enter, as something invisible is preventing them from passing through. Just at that moment, Engin and the cleaners enter the city as if nothing is wrong, which leaves them even more confused. Ludo stays where he is, not understanding what's going on, but Engin tells him that nothing is happening, so he should just go in. This is because he can enter and leave the city as long as he doesn't have bad intentions. Ludo confirms this by passing through the entrance without any problems, leaving the other guys very surprised. The group heads into a city full of art and paint cans, so they start admiring the graffiti as they walk. Engin tells them that there are people who paint all over Terra, but there are also people who don't like it. That's why they created Canvas Town, so that anyone could come and paint freely. Sanka mentions that there are more paintings every time she comes, since in reality the whole city is a canvas. Rilo comments that Corpus told her it used to be called the City of Art, but Ludo asks if they only came to look at the drawings. Engin replies that they didn't, and explains that they've come to see a giver who has the power to paint. His ability is to put an amulet on things with his paint, although since he can't explain it very well, he decides to give an example. Engin points to a wall, saying that it can be imbued with the feeling or sense of nullifying the first attack it receives. They do this by painting that feeling onto the wall, and that way the ability takes effect. Another example would be the two guys who couldn't enter the city and the giver's painting on the wall, which has a spell to prevent people with bad intentions from coming in. That's why they couldn't get in, since they were probably planning to do something bad in the city. Ludo comments that. He says that in that case they can be used for anything, and Engin tells him that the vital instrument of that artist is very rare. After all, it's not really his, but something that's been passed down for generations. While he's explaining this, a little girl suddenly bumps into him, but everyone is surprised to see that she's crying. The little girl quickly wipes away her tears and gets up to run away from the place, leaving Engin very confused. Everyone looks at Engin and silently judges him, and Rio is the first to say that the girl was crying because of him. Just at that moment, a man approaches them and comments that they arrived earlier than he expected. Engin is surprised to see that it's the mayor, so he quickly regains his composure and tells him that he thought he would be at home as usual. He then asks him where Gob is, since they wanted to ask him for a spell, but he is puzzled by the man's serious expression. The mayor keeps a serious face and tells him that Gob died this morning. Unable to believe this news, the group follows the mayor to see Gob's body, and he informs them that the cause of death was bodily contamination. Gob wasn't satisfied with the safe zones, so he went to paint in the contaminated area. He probably took off his mask, carried away by the excitement of painting, despite all the times I asked him to keep it on. Engin kneels beside Gob's body, and the other cleaners approach to pay their respects. Ludo simply stands frozen in place, remembering the time he saw Gob painting at the cleaners' headquarters. Engin had told him that Gob was the kind of guy who kept doing what he wanted without wavering, and Gob had said there were still many things he wanted to paint. The mayor apologizes that this happened during their visit, but Engin asks him not to worry about them. Ludo looks increasingly affected by the situation, so Tamzir reminds him not to take it to heart, since it's a common cause of death in Terra. The mayor tells them that the heir has already been decided, since Gob's vital instrument is passed down from generation to generation. Whoever possesses it chooses their successor, although he doesn't know by what criteria they do so. It could be talent for painting or something much deeper. The only thing he knows is that the chosen one, upon receiving the vital instrument, which is a feather, always awakens their giver powers and starts their business as a sorcerer. The successor Gob chose happens to be the girl who bumped into Engin earlier, whose name is Remlim Taysark. The mayor comments that she had Gob's recognition and, as an artist, inheriting this feather is an honor, but Remlim is still too young. Sorcerers are the ones who bring clients to the city, so he doesn't know if she'll be able to withstand the pressure. Ludo stares at the girl, noticing that she hasn't stopped crying since they saw her. He only mentions that objects don't become vital instruments without being cared for over a long period of time, but apparently, people with a given nature can become one immediately upon obtaining a vital instrument, even if it isn't theirs. It also depends on the quality of the vital instrument, but as Zanga says, it's a talent. Tamsir replies that inheriting vital instruments is extremely rare, talent aside. The mayor apologizes to Engin, saying that this time it will take a while, since Remlim was very attached to Gob and surely saw him as a brother. The situation quickly affects the mayor as well, who starts to cry while remembering how much Gob loved to paint. He didn't care if it was a commission, he always painted what he wanted with a smile. He never had any talent for art, but he became mayor to take care of this environment. Engin acknowledges that this is true, since Gob used to go to the cleaner's headquarters to paint whatever he wanted and would leave whenever he felt like it. That's why it saddens him now that he won't be able to see his mischievous smile when he ran off anymore. The mood in the room quickly drops, and noticing how depressed everyone is, Engin decides that it would be best for them to leave. Before leaving, he turns to Remlim and tells her that they will come back to visit her, so she should take good care of herself. The girl doesn't give him any response, so Engin smiles and continues on his way. However, just at that moment, Remlim stands up and shouts at the top of her lungs, exclaiming that it's over. This leaves them all very shocked, but Remlim wipes away her tears and tells them that the depression is over. With a smile, she exclaims that it's time to party. But everyone in the room is left speechless, completely in shock by such an abrupt change. Suddenly, Remlim grabs her new life support device from the mayor's hands and without warning, runs out of the place. After reacting, the group decides to follow her to the building's rooftop to see what she's going to do. Remlim arranges several cans of paint and explains to them that she felt Gob's death as something very painful and sad, but she knows he won't be able to have fun in the afterlife if they stay here crying. That's why Remlim takes her life support device and upon opening the pen unleashes her new ability, transforming it into a new paintbrush. Ludo is amazed to see the explosion of color, and Remlim doesn't waste any time, turning the floor into a new canvas and creating a circle around the paint cans. When she finishes, all the cans start to glow and each one explodes at the same time, releasing a burst of colors that resemble fireworks in the sky. Everyone in the city is dazzled by the spectacle and stops what they're doing to admire the brilliant colors. So Remlim takes the opportunity to shout at the top of her lungs that everyone should have fun. Ludo is completely dazzled, just like everyone else, and as he watches the colors in the sky, he remembers Leguto for a moment, holding his hand when he was a child. In no time, the look of surprise on everyone's faces in the city turns into a warm smile as they are swept up by Remlim's joy. So, without waiting any longer, each of them grabs an instrument, be it paint cans, brushes, or paintbrushes, to paint the city with even more colors. Remlim sits down to rest, clearly satisfied with what she has accomplished. With a smile, she looks up at the sky and says they should bid farewell to Gob with joy, painting and playing without stopping. Everyone in the city laughs and celebrates with great enthusiasm, spreading paint everywhere, completely forgetting the sadness that had overtaken them. The mayor can't help but smile and once again apologizes to Engin, saying that the spell will take some time, just as he thought. Engin also smiles and replies that he already knows, since they are in Canvas Town, the city of joy and freedom. The colorful fireworks never stop for a moment, just like the people's happiness. In the midst of all this, Ludo's eyes light up, still dazzled by the grand spectacle in the city that never stops celebrating.